Welcome to Humphreys of Henley TV, countryside concierge at its finest. And welcome again to Blenheim. And today we are celebrating one of our greatest Britons. Well, he has been voted our greatest Briton, the incredible Winston Churchill. And we're standing here in the Winston Churchill Memorial Garden, which is just so special. There's a 90-metre path to represent the 90 years of his life, and it marks all of the significant events from Edward VII being crowned through to World War II and so on. It really is lovely, and particularly with the daffodils out today. Now, Winston Churchill was born here in 1874, and you can see his bedroom with the remarkably small bed, actually, but they even have some little golden ringlets from when he was a child and had his first haircut. And he always described Blenheim as being incredibly special. He said it inspired him, it gave him solace, particularly through those war years where he had the fate of our country in his hands. So he grew up here, and he famously said of the palace that he made the two best decisions of his life: to be born and to be married. And at the Temple of Diana, just behind us there, is where he proposed to his darling Clementine. He'd met her in London a few years earlier, but he wanted a romantic setting to propose, so he asked his friend Charles, who was the 9th Duke, to host a little house party so that he could invite Clementine and propose to her. His plan apparently was to propose in the Rose Garden, but the good old English weather intervened, so they had to take shelter in the Temple of Diana, and that's where he popped the question, and she wonderfully happily said yes. Now, Churchill really is iconic for most of us in this country because of what he did, and I certainly remember studying him in quite some detail when I was at university, particularly those negotiations between Stalin, Roosevelt and him during the Yalta conferences and the Potsdam conferences. And there's one fabulous story that sticks out in my mind. They were at the Yalta conference in 1945, and Roosevelt and Churchill, obviously closely allied, and were doing battle against Stalin, who was trying to take control of as much land in Europe as he possibly could. So Roosevelt went to visit Churchill one evening in his rooms to have a little private chat. So he arrived with all of his entourage, and Churchill was nowhere to be seen, and then he suddenly appeared out of his bathroom, clearly having just got out of the bath with not a scrap of clothing on, and Roosevelt apologised profusely, and Churchill replied rather cleverly, "Don't you worry, we have nothing to hide from the Americans." So that sums up their relationship, and I think they did very well in difficult circumstances. Now, the Churchill exhibition includes all of that sort of thing. Inside the palace, it's got a treasure trove of letters, a piece of shrapnel that nearly hit Churchill, and it's just wonderful and really takes you through the timeline of his life and the incredible work that he did. So if you're a lover of beautiful gardens and fabulous history and a very important period in our history, then it's worth coming to Blenheim just for that, if nothing else. And you can see this magnificent bust behind me, which I think does do him justice.
Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at General Eisenhower's headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied expeditionary forces and simultaneously to the Soviet High Command. Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing Today is Victory in Europe Day. Tomorrow will also be Victory in Europe Day. But let us not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead. Japan, with all her treachery and greed, remains unsubdued. The injuries she has inflicted upon Great Britain, the United States and other countries, and her detestable cruelties call for justice and retribution. We must now devote all our strength and resources to the completion of our tasks, both at home and abroad. Advance, Britannia! Long live the cause of freedom! God save the King!
It's wonderful to remind ourselves of those fabulous words from our wartime leader Winston Churchill, particularly on the 75th anniversary of V-Day today. And I know there are celebrations, maybe a little more muted than were planned, but certainly celebrations across the country. It's hard to imagine how the public really felt, the emotion that they must have felt listening to those words of Churchill. Although maybe with everything that the world is dealing with in this year 2020, we might have a little bit of a sense of what they were hoping for in the future. We've thoroughly enjoyed our amazing time in Blenheim. We hope we've got across to you just how wonderful it is here, how well worth a visit it is, whatever sort of visit you decide to go on. And we very much look forward to seeing you next week when we will share another wonderfully special part of the British countryside. We look forward to seeing you then.